This episode is brought to you by the iTnews Cloud-Covered Breakfast Summit, powered by Microsoft and Teradata. Hosted at the Ivy Sunroom on June 4th, we are bringing together technology and business decision makers to discuss building AI-ready data in the cloud. With panels on stage and audience discussion sessions, the summit will cover Australia's rapid shift to public cloud as a foundation for scalable AI. Register your interest in joining us now on iTnews.com.au. Hello and welcome to the iTnews podcast. Our guest this fortnight is Telstra's Group Executive of Product and Technology, Krogh Andersen. The beginnings of this episode was a LinkedIn post pointing to a significant milestone in Telstra's multi-year IT estate transformation and simplification. The telco is exiting its 20-year-old Siebel customer relationship management system, alongside technology by Teradata, Veritas, and pivotal cloud Foundry. Join us as we unpack the retirement of these systems and discuss the composable architecture that now underpins Telstra's IT estate, which, among other things, is de-risking the telco from vendor lock-in.
Simplification and also technology have been a core part of Telstra's strategy, not only the current one, but also what we call T22 and T25. We started the journey to simplify our product and plan portfolio back in 2018, where we reduced 1,800 plans down to 20. And that was really to ensure our customers had a more clear experience, and that helped quite a bit. We have seen NPS really go up after that simplification. We also took away the back book, so customers are always on the newest plans. And we also took away the device subsidies, and we also took away lock-in contracts. So we simplified a lot on the commercial and the product side. And that was, of course, also to set us up to successfully transform and simplify our IT estate. We have looked at big CRM programs and simplification programs and migration programs across the world. And still, my latest number is that more than 80% of them are failing, and only 10 to 15% are really successful. Then there is a little bit in between. So when we looked at these benchmarks, commercial and process simplification was critical to get the IT transformation done in an appropriate way. And we have also experienced this ourselves. We have a few attempts where we got most of it done, but we didn't get the long tail and the difficult part in the end closed down. And that means you still sit there with some legacy in your environment. This one was important for us to get done, not only to 95%, but to 100%. And that was why it was a moment in time when we shared internally the fact that we now have all our customers migrated away from Siebel, and not just 99%, but every single customer. That, of course, gave me, as leading the technology, the opportunity to shut down the IT system, the IT application, but also ensure we simplify our data platforms as a part of that. That has been a long journey, but I would say it's not standing alone. It is a fundamental part of what we believe in, that is to ensure that simplification, modernization. We have a very black and white approach that either things are operated and modernized or they're out. It's as simple as that. And I think you need a little bit of that very deliberate approach to your IT and your data and AI, which we can come back to ensure that you're not always catching up. So that's really our approach. We still have things we have not got exited yet or optimized and modernized yet. But that is our philosophy. And the reason for me also sharing things like this is that these things often go below the radar, because that's just operational things in the background. It's not really the big deal. We rather talk about new features and new releases. But for me and for us, it's a cultural thing. It's a fundamental integrated part of what we call tech leadership in our current strategy. Simplification, modernization, cyber resiliency. That is so critical. We are telco, and a proud one, where we can see our customers use our core product, the network, more and more. They are more and more depending on it. And of course, the use cases get more and more sophisticated. If you don't have these fundamentals in place, it's difficult for you to deliver on something so fundamental for our customers. So that whole modernization, that whole simplification is such a critical part of our culture now. And it's really great to see that our people start thinking about this as equally critical to releasing new stuff, and also something people are proud of.
So you mentioned Siebel there. When did that whole process start, and where have you moved customers to?
Siebel have been the CRM system inside Telstra for more than 20 years. It's more than 8.2 million services that have been migrated away from that to a modern IT infrastructure. Most of that is on the Salesforce CRM, but we of course have a simplified, decoupled, ODA compliant IT estate there now where we have moved these things to. We started very small services to be migrated, and in the peak, which was last year, we migrated 203,000 services in one single week. That has really been a journey. I would say the last part, which started in July 25, was really a complicated one where we had around 60,000 customers that have very customized specific services that we manually needed to migrate. And then again, the last part, the last mile we have just got done now have been super manual, and we have really been in contact with most of these customers. So it has been a deliberate approach we have taken in Telstra because, of course, we are a supplier of these things that have very high expectations and we want to live up to them. So we have handheld it and ensured that every single customer that they get across in the best possible way. I've been operating these kind of things across the globe, and others are doing it differently where it's more big bang. We have really taken a conscious approach to this to ensure we get the customers over to the new environment in a way that there is as little pain in that transition as possible. And we have not seen an increase in complaints and these things. We have actually, through the whole process and the whole time we have migrated, every time we get people to the new environment, we have seen increased NPS, less complaints, and also that people want to stay with us longer. So overall, it has been a massive success. But as many of these, they always take a little longer than you expect, and they also cost a little bit more than you expect. But I'm super proud that we actually get into that bucket of the 10 to 50% globally that get the job done, and not because it get painful, just stop and say, we'll not get it finalized. We'll do other things that is more interesting. And that's a credit to the entire Telstra team, because that go from the board keeping challenging us to get it done, to the management, to the frontline employees that have these difficult conversations with customers where they need to transition to the new environment, to the software people, to the whole company of Telstra. It's been a massive journey, but I really credit the stamina to get it done, to not stop when it's become difficult, but just push through that and get to the other side of it. We have seen the benefit, and it's also fundamental for us moving into a future that will have even more demand of that dependency, the resiliency, the cyber, all these things. Of course, when you get a smaller environment, you can easily protect yourself. It's also modern. It also means that you don't develop in two different environments, so therefore you can be more efficient and release features faster. So it will give us a lot of benefits. But it's also setting up the foundation, because of course, as a part of our strategy is also to be an AI first company and be a leader in AI. I have a big belief that if you don't have that foundation in place, if you don't have your data platform and data management in place, if you don't have a simplified and modern infrastructure, it'll be very difficult to scale AI. You can still do use cases, but to scale it in a sustainable way where you can keep control of cyber and all these things, but at the same time also keep the run cost of AI down. If you don't have these fundamental things in place, it'll be difficult for you to scale in a sustainable way, which is critical for us and something we proudly try to really ensure we can maintain that efficient way to apply new technologies, because we believe that's good for the customer, because we can normally do things faster. And then of course for the company, we don't want all the benefit from AI just become revenue in big US companies' pockets. We want to ensure that benefit we get from AI that really benefits Telstra's customers and our shareholders in the end of the day.
If we can just go back to the Siebel side of things, I'm just wondering, because you mentioned that the last cohorts of customers, I guess, that you migrated across, there was more complexity in the way that their product set they were using or the way that it was implemented. But can you just talk a little bit about, I guess, how ingrained Siebel was within the organizations and the processes? And I think as a related part to that question, in the LinkedIn post, you mentioned there were a lot of edge cases that were implemented in Siebel. And this twigged my interest because I heard NAB speak in San Francisco. One of the things they mentioned was that they found things that should have been in their core banking system were implemented within their data environment. So they were then having to try and bring things back into the core. I just wondered what you found when you were looking through the Siebel system and what some of that more complicated work looked like.
It's a very good question and reflection because, of course, when you have a CRM system like Siebel for more than 20 years, there have happened customization over time. That's some of the things that was linked to some of these long tail customers, some of that customization. And we also needed to get Siebel decoupled from 54 other applications to ensure you could untangle all that complexity and hard-coded interfaces that was done into that CRM. We have enterprise customers that somehow ended up in Siebel that should not be in Siebel. We have e-commerce systems, we have office facilities, we have insolvency management, and a lot of different processes that somehow become hard-coded and interlinked into the CRM system that in a fully architecture compliant setup would have decoupled with much simpler APIs that you could just somehow transition away from the CRM platform without having the same level of complexity and pain when you do it. And that's why we really doubled down on what we call Telstra's reference architecture model, TRAM, because there we are following the ODA with the TM Forum compliant architecture, which is really about decoupling and have that API first architecture in place where you can orchestrate and you can do these things in a composable manner. So you don't necessarily need to shift the whole thing every time you want to modernize or exit or simplify a component inside your IT estate. We have simply not been disciplined enough in architecture historically. And that's why we have doubled down on that in the last 2-3 strategy periods. It's probably a good reflection to clean up things like this architecture, the API interfaces, the composable architecture. You need to have persistency and you need to have patience, but at the same time, some of that conviction that you need to get it done.
Customizations, I think, were of the era that we're talking about there, and it wasn't limited to Siebel. A whole bunch of those big systems became monolithic for a reason. They just kept customizing. There's a big effort across industries, I think, now to really move back to an out-of-the-box, non-customized as much as possible systems.
We will still have customization because if you, for instance, look at CRM system and a lot of the complexity in Siebel and other things, that's also come because regulation changes every year and therefore there is new things you need to tweak inside that. But I think the trick to avoid that monolithic, as you rightly describe it, vertically integrated customization, that is to really have that composable architecture. Because if you have that, you're much better prepared. If you want to shift one component inside your estate, you don't need to have these massive transformation programs that many companies have struggled with for a very long time. And back to the percentage where 80% of them were not successful. I think one of the reasons for that is that they become so holistic and monolithic in nature. And if you have a strict architecture, you can ensure that you have an always modernized, always on IT estate. And that's the only way to scale into a much more digital, much more AI first future. If you have not got these things in place and get these things done now, I think you will struggle to get the full benefit of AI. At the same time, AI is probably one of the most important tools to accelerate some of these refactoring and modernization and even exit of your estate. If you look at our Teradata, we did that much, much faster. It was intended to take much longer than it took. And the reason for us being able to do it faster was AI. The same with the PCF platform. We expected it to take 3 times the time of what it actually did. And that was again because we have used AI in that refactoring. There is no element of this. It's also to ensure that you're not in login, because I think, without mentioning any specific providers, but there is providers out there that really hike the prices of their technology at the moment. They have recognized that many companies are in logins and therefore have really no alternative. And therefore, you become very vulnerable from a commercial point of view if you don't get that decoupling done and that ability to shift and even commoditize some of these partners that have shown that they take all means to maximize their revenue out of these things, and therefore you become very vulnerable. And that's another reason Telstra's reference architecture is so critical, that we have that ability to actually shift if we are not treated with the respect we believe we deserve.
Just on PCF and Teradata, because you just mentioned them, what was the target state that you moved to? Is that both into some sort of cloud-based system?
for PCF, we moved into public cloud, and that was 158 applications that was impacted. But some of them we exited, some of them we moved to public cloud. So that's just one example. And then, of course, for Teradata, we moved that to public cloud as well. Some of the benefit with public cloud is that you by default get into a modern environment where you don't have old hardware, you don't have non-up-to-date application to the same degree as some companies have on the more private environment where you need to ensure you have updated hardware, updated software, all these things. It's by default when you're on public cloud, you get more modernized and you cannot have the same level of old tech. We have very clear data points that old hardware and not optimized and not modern software, that give you vulnerability, and we want to avoid that. And one of the ways to avoid that is to use the public cloud platforms. And then again, similar architecture is critical for us on the public cloud platforms, that we have that ability to move between them. So again, we avoid being in a lock-in. We try to do that across all layers, both with the software product suppliers, but also on the data and the cloud layer. We try to have a very layered and a very composable architecture that give us the optionalities and always ensure that somehow our partners need to deserve to be our partners and not just log us in and therefore give away all the leverage. It's not that we want to treat our partners in a transactional way, not at all actually. We are actually moving to much more strategic partnerships. But we don't want to be in a lock-in where we have no optionalities and where somehow we are at risk of being exposed to significant commercial risk as a company. And architecture is the best way to avoid that, because you have that ability to move away from partners if you don't get a reasonable commercial arrangement in place and if they don't treat you as a strategic partner.
Because you mentioned it so many times, I think we should just understand a little bit more about the composable architecture. I think you called it the Telstra reference architecture, which is based on the TM Forum's open digital architecture. Do you want to just talk about why you've adopted that specific structure and I guess the Telstra version of that thinking?
Yeah, 100%. It is exactly to avoid these logins, and it's to give us that ability to move much faster. If you think about it historically, every time we want to change a feature in the product or in the app or something like that, most of these changes have vertically been integrated to the entire IT estate, and therefore everything needs to be tested, because when you touch the core of the infrastructure and these things, then you have very strict testing regime and all these things. So everything, both big and small, need to be tested to the entire value chain. With the composable architecture, you have that ability to decouple. So you actually have different circle times. So you can release things on the My Telstra app, or you can release things in the product without necessarily touching the CRM systems. And when you have that decoupling in place, you somehow accelerate the feature releases, and therefore you have that ability to create continuous improvement for the customer experience in a much more agile way. And this is, of course, the same way as native software and native digital companies are operating, and therefore this was a natural way for us to go. Then you can say, but you could have done that without applying the ODA out of TM Forum. Yes, but the benefit of that is that's an industry standards that all the telcos across the world, they actually apply. We have always been quite good at standardization in the network part of a telco, because you need roaming and these things to work across, and you need to have a standardized way to buy equipment from partners and all these things. Now we have applied some of the same standardization to the IT estate. So again, here, not only do all the telcos comply to ODA, but actually the suppliers to the telco industry are complying to that as well. And we, of course, need the APIs that we standardized. We need them standardized out of Salesforce, Amdocs, and all the other partners that are in the ecosystems. So the fact that we work in a standardized way across the telco industry, that gives us that global leverage in the conversation with a lot of global partners, because a lot of the providers are global, but most telcos are domestic. So it gives us some of that leverage when we actually have agreed on how we want our architecture to work. For us, that has been critical. We take the ODA, that's the critical part, and inside TM Forum, they now have 3 mission boards, as they call them. And that's really 3 areas of focus. One is the ODA, which is the most mature of them, which is the one we have replicated into our Telstra reference architecture model. Then they have a stream around AI to really ensure that, again, we take some of that standardization across how we approach AI inside a telco. And that has really become another critical mission board stream. And then the third one is what we call autonomous network, which is really to apply AI and autonomy inside the network in the way we operate our network. And Telstra, we have decided to be deeply integrated into each of these 3, and we also take leadership roles to ensure we can drive that forward. So for ODA, we actually have our chief architect really pushing hard into that. For data and AI, we have Dale Stevens and Arnab that is the two co-CEOs for our joint venture. They are represented in the mission board in TM Forum. And for the autonomous network, I'm actually the co-chair of that, together with Dr. Huido, who is the Chief Network Officer of China Mobile. So we have really ensured that we are well represented there, and we try to drive the industry forward in that TM Forum setup. That is to ensure, because on the global stage and in the tech environment, even a company like Telstra is tiny compared to a lot of the partners we need to work with in a constructive and strategic partnership fashion. So for us to have that leverage of all our peers across the globe, that's super critical to ensure we can scale in a sustainable and cost-effective way.
Was there anything else we missed that you wanted to get across?
No, I really think it's a cultural thing to really drive modernization, resiliency, simplicity with a similar level of focus as you do for innovation and new stuff. And I think these two things are interrelated. If you don't get the foundation in place, you'll be slow and you'll not be able to innovate to the same degree, and you'll not be able to take advantage of AI in a sustainable way. So for me, these things are interlinked, and I think it has taken time to really have that center of our strategy and also our culture inside Telstra. And I think companies need to go there if they want to be successful going forward.
That's the episode for this fortnight. Stay tuned for the next episode. And for all the latest headlines and happenings in Australian technology news, head over to itnews.com.au.